What's up, guys? Welcome back. So we're talking air lockers versus e-lockers, and we're going to go over some things on each and hopefully get you guys some more information so you can, if you're going to be doing axles yourself or upgrading a locker yourself, let's kind of go over some things that you might run into. So what are we comparing? Well, we're comparing an Eaton Dana 44 e-locker and a Yukon Dana 44 zip locker. Now, both of these are 30 spline, low speed units, so very comparable in what they would be used for. Now, the zip locker is less expensive. I will tell you that right out of the box. The price difference between these two is between $300 and $400, depending on where you're going to get them. So keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind, if you're going to go with the zip locker, these are drilled for 7/16 bolts. So if you're not going to use a Yukon gear set, say you use a USA Standard or a Motive Gear or any gear set that's only drilled to run the 3/8 diameter standard Dana 44 ring gear bolt, you're going to have to get, now this is not the Yukon spacer, but Yukon makes a spacer. It's about a third of this length that actually fits over the bolt to make up the difference for the larger 7/16 bolts holes that they have drilled in here. Now these are only singularly drilled, whereas you have the e-locker, which has the 3/8 bolt holes, and it also has the 1/2-inch bolt holes for the JKs, which makes these really, really nice. You can use them in multiple situations. So I'm a big e-locker fan. I know they're more expensive, but I think they're just easier to set up. They take your standard carrier bearings. The way the stator is on here, it just makes setup really easy. And the nice thing is yes, you can drill a hole through the center section if you want to. And in most cases, I will do that. But a buddy of mine also came up with, if you're kind of against doing that, and I'll show you on the 44 we're doing here, where we're doing the air locker. So this was the breather hole, and I just drilled that out for the bulkhead fitting, and that's where my bulkhead fitting goes. Now in here, if I can even get it, so you can see right there, there's a rib right here. So you have to figure where that's at, but I just like to put my breather right behind that. But you are going to have to drill an extra hole in your housing. There's really no way to get around that. Now where you put your breather, I just like to put it back here because there's more material. You could put it here. You could do a lot of things. But one of the drawbacks with the air locker, you absolutely have to do that. Whereas with the e-locker and the wires, a buddy of mine came up with the idea of, well, hey, why don't you just grind a groove right into here, set that in. Most of us are siliconing instead of using gaskets anyway. Hey, that makes it much easier. You don't actually have to drill another hole in the housing. So that's one of the benefits of the e-lockers. Again, they take standard bearings as opposed to you go to the air locker, they're going to send you bearings with it. So what you do with these bearings is you press them on first, and on this one side you can see you have the excess sitting out there. You put your shims on, and then you have your seal housing. And that's what we're going to talk about with the air locker, and one of the big issues I have with air lockers. So here's our seal housing, and as you can see, the O-rings have been removed, and oh boy, the copper line is not in there either. So that's how that would sit on there. You also make sure when you're shimming these that this cannot move. I've seen more copper lines just broken off because people don't shim this good enough and it just spins on there. So don't allow that to happen. Now in this one, the copper line did not break off. The copper line literally just pulled out. And this was probably the second time I was putting the locker in to check preload, and I went to take it out and barely move this line, and it just comes right out of there. Now you can say, well, it wasn't soldered well enough, the oil interfered, I don't know. But this is a problem I've seen a lot with ARBs and even the zip lockers now, where you have this issue with the copper line just coming out of the seal housing. And it's very frustrating. It's not the most difficult thing to fix. You just grind that out, put the copper line back in, and resolder it I've done it quite a few times, but it is kind of frustrating. The other frustrating part of doing the air lockers is because of how they do the bearings, the way you shim these now, you know, here's your shims. This side's not that difficult because your seal housing right here kind of makes sure everything is centered and protected. But your opposing side is a lot more difficult. And as you can see, we've got two tiny shims. Those are probably 3,000 shims. And then we have our 10,000 shim right here along with the big shim. And the biggest problem is when you have to go set this in the housing to try and keep all this lined up and to keep these from getting nicked and bent, it's just kind of a pain. Now I do have the tool for installing these, and I would recommend getting the proper tool for knocking these in. But it's just one of those things with the air lockers that I don't love. And I understand they're a little bit less expensive. I think when you start adding up the cost of, you know, buying the compressor and doing all the stuff, it does get to be where the cost difference isn't that much different that, you know, it makes the most sense overall. But there are the guys out there that just love air lockers and, you know, think it's the best thing out there. And I will say, look, if you're running a certain specific setup, we're trying to build, or not trying, we will be building a high pinion Dana 44 front axle for a buddy of mine's, TJ, and we're going to be going to 35 spline inner shafts in the front. We're going to do an RCVs, and to do that, we are going to have to run an air locker. So there's just some things to watch out for if you're going to do an air locker, things to think about in doing it. I would say if you're going to be doing air lockers, get good at soldering, because you're probably going to run into this issue of the seal housing and the copper line coming out at some point in time, or just adding to it, because again, what I've seen is they do not put that much in the way of solder on these things from the factory. So just some things to think about, and hopefully this guy gives you guys some more information, and maybe gives you a little bit clearer path on what you're going to do going forward. All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.